think what has been interesting for me was how the model has been picked up by sort of all kinds of people in different places and levels. One of our principles was that the model should be exportable, they should be transparent, they should be easy to understand. It's easy in the days of the web. It wasn't so easy before the web to get things out for people to use. But I thought that was really important, the principle that people should know what you're doing and should be able to replicate it or not, as the case would be. I thought it was also very important scientifically because these are the things I've been working on are very complex system models. They're 10 or 15 nonlinear dynamic equations, and if there's one thing we know about these equations, they have all kinds of complex, they have complex behavior, and they can behave in strange ways, and they can sort of go off the rails. So I thought it was really important because at the beginning I didn't actually know if it was right, if there were mistakes in it, if there was some unstable dynamics. So I thought the best way to find out was actually to have people reprogram it, tear it apart, criticize it, and they did. After the first attempt to do that, I just sort of routinely made everything public and easily available to people, and I'm really glad I did. The science changes from year to year. We learn a lot more about the economics. We've got a lot to learn about the economics because, for example, we don't actually know how much it would cost to slow climate change because we haven't started doing it. And it's sort of like we're recommending a big dose of some drug for the economy when we've never taken that drug before. So we need to know how the economy is going to respond to this. We think we know, but we don't know for sure. And so we've got a lot to learn specifically in that area. The reason is let's say you decided I can only project out 30 years, well, then basically you would go home because nothing's going to happen in 30 years. So you actually have to project out for many decades to see what the result of what we're doing today is going to be. But the other thing is that it's an interesting point that I'm not really interested in what's going to happen in the year 2100 so much as I'm interested in what we should do today. So what you're asking is how much uncertainty there is about today's policies. And it turns out today's policies are not that sensitive to these projections. So if you might vary the growth rate by sort of plus or minus some uncertainty bound, you're not going to get a huge change on what our policy is today. So really the purpose of this is not to figure out what's going to happen in 2200, but to figure out what kinds of steps we should do today. But you can't do that without a long-term projection, because if you just did a little bit, you would say, we do nothing today because nothing's going to happen. So I think this is one of the features of these long-term projections. It's kind of interesting that you're not actually asking what's going to happen in 2200, but you're asking about, given our best guess about the climatology, the carbon cycle, the economics, what should we do today? And what you're trying to do is get a kind of a pretty good fix on that in terms of, say, pricing carbon dioxide emissions or emission reductions. We need to put a price on emissions because otherwise people will continue to emit whatever they like. And the higher the price, and as you raise the price of emissions, the emissions will go down. Just like when gasoline prices go up, gasoline consumption goes down. But we need to get some idea of how high. Should it be $1, $10, $100, $1,000? So that's what these models are actually used for. They're used to estimate. So for example, say we think that we want to limit the temperature rise to 3 degrees C over the next, whatever, decades. What kind of pricing structure on this emissions would help cap that temperature increase? And so we can use models to estimate that because they have all the structure in terms of the costs, the impact on emissions, the carbon cycle, the climate model. So you can actually say, okay, if we want to limit it to this amount, then you need such and such a price today. So I think that's actually one of the neatest things that comes out of these models is it's telling you, given your objectives for the coming decades, what should you do today and in the next decade to reach those targets. So I think the single most important objective in modeling is to find the right balance between reflecting the complexity of the world and retaining transparency and simplicity. Obviously, we can't represent everything, and you can't represent every country, every year, every sector, every person. We couldn't do it even if we wanted to do it. So what you have to do is ask, what are the essential ingredients that we need for these models? So we at Yale have had two basic classes of model. There's the very simple model, which is actually about as simple as it was 20 years ago. And then there are these complex, and that's basically just a single global aggregated model. And then we have regional models that incorporate, they go from 6 to, say, 15 countries or regions. And then other places have more regions and more sectors and so on. My own understanding works best with these little tiny models because I understand how they work. And when you get into the big models, you lose kind of intuition for what's happening. And also you can make mistakes. So I think the art of modeling is to try to understand what's going on, but to simplify to the essentials, not to try to reproduce the complexity of realities, but of the world, but try to represent the simplest things like output, emission, in this case, say output, emissions, temperature, damages, things like that, and in a way that is consistent. So just one other point. So one of the things you want to do, say, you have a module that deals with the climate in one of these models, you want it to be consistent with the state-of-the-art climate models. So you'd always want to say, okay, so what do they show? What's the trajectory? How do they respond to shocks? And you'd want to build a model that represents these larger models in a reasonably faithful way, but not in the detail they have, but in the broad sweep of their magnitudes and responses and timing and dynamics. No computer could ever do this. There's you wouldn't know where to start. You could read one of these thick books that was just produced by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, it's just like all this, a lot of undigested or semi-digested material, a table on this, a graph on that, a statement on this. But, it is an art. The art of modeling is to find a way to take these and put them in something that you can understand, you can represent, you can test other people. And here again, I want to emphasize the social side of this, which is that other people can understand and other people can test and other people can say, this just doesn't make sense, or you really ought to look at this really carefully. And so the social side of this is a very important factor.